brought to a breakthrough. In 1980, he created an equation of his own, one that combined all of the Julia sets into a single image. When Mandelbrot iterated his equation, he got his own set of numbers. Graphed on a computer, it was a kind of roadmap of all the Julia sets, and quickly became famous as the emblem of fractal geometry. The Mandelbrot set.
It's not easy to describe the Mandelbrot set visually. It looks like a man, it looks like a cat, it looks like a cactus, it looks like a cockroach. It's got little bits and pieces that remind us of almost anything that you can see out in the real world, particularly living things. So it has a character that reminds us of a lot of things, and yet it itself is unique and new.
The Mandelbrot set is real, an absolute thing, no question whatsoever. Any mathematician or any computer scientist or student in a school can study it and find the same, describe the same thing. It's a common experience. And so such things that can be magnified forever and have infinite precision do exist, but they're not touchable.
It's a geometrical shape, an icon, if you wish, which somehow embodies as an example a very important aspect of how the world works. Somebody recently actually called this set the thumbprint of God.
With this mysterious image, Mandelbrot was issuing a bold challenge to long-standing ideas about the limits of mathematics.
The blinders came off, and people could see forms that were always there, but formerly were invisible.
The Mandelbrot set was a great example of what you could do in fractal geometry, just as the archetypical example of classical geometry is the circle.
When you zoom in, you see them coming up again, so you see self-similarity. You see, by zooming in, you zoom, you're zooming in, you're zooming in, and pop. Suddenly it seems like you're exactly where you were before, but you're not. It's just that way down there, it has the same kind of structure as way up here, and the sameness can be groked.
Now we'll begin our serious exploration of the Mandelbrot set. A voyage which, in fact, could last forever and ever, much longer than the lifetime of the universe. I have here the full set, about 6 inches across. Now, if I blow this up, I'll increase the magnification now 13 times, and you see more and more detail is appearing. And the interesting thing is you see mini Mandelbrots, replicas, almost identical, yet perhaps subtly different, of the original set. And I can go on doing this. Here's a magnification of more than 3,000 times. So the original picture, about 6 inches across, is now half a mile across. And no matter how much we magnified it, a million times, a billion times, until the original set was bigger than the entire universe, we would still see new patterns, new images emerging, because the frontier, the M set, is infinitely complex. And when I say infinitely, I really mean that. Most people, when they say infinitely, they mean only rather big. But this is really infinity. is so remarkable, in fact, astounding, about the Mandelbrot set is that although it's infinitely complex, it's based on incredibly simple principles, unlike almost everything in modern mathematics. In fact, anybody who can add and multiply can understand the principles on which it's based. You don't even have to subtract or divide, still less use logarithms or trigonometrical functions to comprehend how the Mandelbrot set is created. In fact, in principle, it could have been discovered any time in human history and not merely in 1980. But the problem is this: although it's only based on adding and multiplying, you have to carry out those operations millions, billions of times to create a complete set. And that's why it was not discovered until the era of modern computers.
Shalom, shalom, family. As always, at the 10-minute mark, we're going to say the Lord's Prayer. So bow with me as we say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on a righteous path, and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen, amen, family. Shalom, shalom. So today I just want to do something a little different. I was just checking out some Haplogroup groups, and I just wanted to open up some branches, as I've been noticing some really interesting things, which is biblically exciting, very biblically exciting. I think some of the things that we noted. All right, I just want to talk about the answers of some of the things we found in our little journey, examining the Y chromosome and everything. Now, I heard a geneticist say a very strong statement, and I completely agree. The Y chromosome is the key to pretty much biblical history. It really does open up understanding for the world we live in, and that indeed we do see evidence that God is the one that set these things in order, and we do see evidence of these three lineages of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. There's so much evidence of the Bible. I think studying genetics is interesting. At first, it's tedious. You got to learn the little letters and everything, and learn the codes and what is SNPs and what are even haplogroups and what are even STRs and stuff like that. And then once you get those things down, then it's just about knowing what is what and what's connected to what. I just want to go to a note here. Just looking, make sure, see if I open that there. And one more note here. I'm going to grab from one of these, which would be, in fact, right up here. It's right, this one right here. All right. So I just thought it was really interesting that, when we think of nations like America, a lot of us, we think this is a new thing. Like, we thought that a lot of people back then was just one people, right? When we think of like the Philistines and the Phoenicians and stuff like that, we just like think Canaanite. Oh, that's just Canaanite. But it's actually America, the way that America is, how it's multiple different people. That's how it was in the Philistines. That's how it was in Phoenicia. And that's how it was in many different places, that many different cultures actually mingle together in certain places. Certain places stay to themselves, but some places actually mix cultures, which is really interesting when looking at, which we were taking note of some things, and we can see the evidence of it today, right? I was just looking at the land of Turkey and just looking at some haplogroups, and the haplogroups. The reason why I was looking at this is because I just wanted to see, the story. I wanted to really understand, because I know the history, but I wanted to really feel and understand the story while at the same time looking at these haplogroups. And the reason why is because these haplogroups are different peoples, right? They're different peoples throughout all times, but history actually reveals the truth as well, matching with these different haplogroups, especially when we know which one is what. So I just wanted to open up the E lineage real fast, which I think is really interesting when looking at the E lineage, because what it does is that it breaks into these different types of branches. But if you ever try to open up all these branches, it takes a long time. So I'm not gonna open up all these branches, but what I'm gonna do is actually open up a few in a certain order. So I'm gonna open up a note here. And I want to first look at the E lineage. I want to look at the E lineage because it's actually pretty complex. It's a very large line too. So we already talked. We had a big talk on the E and the J lineage, and we looked at what some geneticists say about each one of these lineages to get a little idea of it. So I'm gonna look right here. All right. So I'm going to open 96, 147, and on and on. Let's go, and then 77, and then from there, we'll open up some more. So I'm just going to close these, make it really fresh from the start. All right. So let's take a look here. All right. Let's take it one more look. Open it up. It actually is a really interesting branch when we look at how many branches there are in each one, because it goes back. It goes really far back. Just looking at these ones at the bottom. Let's go right here. So we got 96, 75. Take a look here. So 96. And we want to get 147. And the reason why this is interesting too, because there's actually a lot of branches in the E lineage. It doesn't mean that just because someone's E, they're actually going to be Israel. In fact, I met a few different people that thought they were Israel in genetics, but upon testing it, they wasn't actually Israel. So some people are Israel, some people aren't. And the reason why we say that, because this lineage is connected with the original Arabs. And we know that because geneticists, they actually mark a certain lineage as the Arabs. But a lot of times you won't see that talked about in media, but you'll commonly see geneticists say that. Like right here, little idea, they'll say this actually has 70 million Turks, this has 70 million Persians, and then you can see down here is 80 million Arabs, right, down there. Now, what's interesting about up there and stuff, we can actually follow the history of the Arabs when the Turkish invasion was happening and stuff. We know without a doubt that the land of the Greeks, the area of the Greeks was actually invaded by the Turks, and they actually moved the Arabs upwards into Greece. We actually know that that was an event that had happened there, and we can find some E in Greece, which is really interesting to see it right up there in a certain line, certain lineages. Right, we see the E when the Turks came in, they defeated the Arabs in this area, pushed them downwards, and then they took this area. Remember, they came, swept through, took Rome, right? Took the area of Constantinople. They had took this and they took some of this. Now, before they took this, they actually took this first. Then they took this area. But they also grabbed some Arabs here and moved them up here. It's actually known in history that they took some and brought some up here, and we see them stationary. And we can see their genetics up there. We can actually follow, and we have a large E, right? We have a large E that's up there, right there. And now it's important to also know that these were Arabs. It's actually historically recorded that the Turks took Arabs, right? They didn't say slaves or nothing like that. They said Arabs in the history. Really interesting history on that. I don't know if you guys seen that, but there's a really interesting history on that. Maybe I'll play real fast before we start opening some more, because we're going to look at that E. I want to see that E1B1B and where that exact split is, and then look at those branches, because it's really interesting seeing the detailed spots of it. So that's what I want to do. I'm going to go to a certain one. I can actually put it in maybe. I'm going to go to the split P2, 179. Let's see if I can find that. I highly doubt I can find it like that. Let's see. Let's type it down. P179. Let's see the best way to find it. If not, we can find it manually. But that's what we got to do. Find it manually. So let's see. 96. And then we want to get here. We want to get to P1. Now I'm going to look for another one though, so I can see if there's another name for it. Because sometimes on certain sites they have certain different names. The names changed. Let's see. We already looking at this one. I'm just seeing if this thing has those simple names. Looks like they have these E dash names. So I'm gonna look for the E dash. I wouldn't find it on this thing. Looking here, maybe I would find it on here. P77. 177. All right, I'm gonna start digging into these things because it's giving me a few and a few. All right, so we got this. Let me just look right here. So, okay, so it goes from here, and then there's two extra ones, but this one breaks off to a different lineage and whatnot. So this one, and then it goes down, and it brings to this one. This is the next one we want to see, and then this is the next one we want to see. Then this is the next one we want to see, and then M2. There it is, M2. Okay. So this is a different lineage. This is actually going to be E1B1C. This is actually going to be E1B1A. This is going to be E1B1C. It's going to be very different. So we're going to look at this. And remember, that's going to be a split of E1B1B, which is actually going to be right here. All right. So we're going to actually have that E1B1B. And let's also check that out right here. So M25, go up a little bit. M25 is going to be the start of E1B1B. So let's go right here. So M25, so you can see right here, we're going to have all the way from this line, right? And then we're going to get here. So this line right here is actually going to be Abraham. This is actually going to be a line of Abraham. And it's going to bring forth these two and these ones. And actually, let's double check to ensure. Because 147, I might be looking at a different one. Let me make sure. Let's go down to the list. Go down to it so we can have the exact one. In fact, I'm just going to click this so it gets easier to go over. Click something and then go over to it. So it's actually bigger than it looks. The way that it's described is probably because there's certain main branches that survived, but it's actually bigger than it actually looks. The branches are actually bigger than it looks. But let's go to a family tree list so we can get a direct line to that E1B1A so we can see where that's at. All right, so this one is not Abraham, this is P2. So that's the thing with that, P2, where would that be? So obviously that's gonna be after this. So one of these is P2. I think it's this one. Let me double check. So E1, B1, right, after 147, and then that's going to bring forth these two. So all you have to do is make sure we find one that's going to bring 38 and 215. So let's see, 215 and 38. This one brings it. So P177. I'm actually going to put something. I'll put a note here on there. So this note is going to be in the description too. But as you see, as you do these things, some different companies have different codes sometimes, and they put different codes, so it can make it kind of hard to find them. But it's not too hard. I'm actually going to put it at the top. I'll put it at the top somewhere. I'll put it down here. All right, Abraham P2, and I'll put what we found on Family Tree right here, because if I close this, all these should close. Yep. So this one brings forth this one, and this one brings forth this one. And then this one brings forth this one. So this is actually Abraham. This is This is Ishmael. This is Abraham, Ishmael, and this is going to be Israel. And then Israel is going to bring forth right here. This is going to be actually Jacob, and this is going to be Esau. Right here is going to be Esau. Right. We actually know that because just by double checking, we can find some of those evidences in there. We can find these evidences. Now, this line right here is going to bring forth the 12. That's actually where we're going to get the 12. So we're going to actually open it up a little bit. So we can see it's got a larger branch. So you can see if I close that, all those will close. All these are underneath here. This will be your 12 that's going to be there. Now, notice it's actually going to be a separate branch. It's not connected to this one, nor is connected to Ishmael. It's not connected to Ishmael. Remember, Ishmael's right here. He has his own branch. These aren't connected. These are actually going to be their own. Now, remember, let me open up another one. The reason why we know this is true is because one of the problems that a lot of geneticists do that we're not going to do, that we're going to actually establish the truth, is that they try to connect the E and the D to the Hamites, and that's actually incorrect. It's actually obviously incorrect when you look at it genetically. Let's go up here. Now, a lot of these male lineages did mix with Hamite women, and that's evident in the scriptures. The scriptures let us know that, right? We got Isaac, right? When he had his son Jacob, we know that Jacob had his 12 sons, and we know with Joseph, he had Ephraim and Manasseh. Those were born from actually Egyptians, so they would actually be born from Hamites, from Hamite lineages. And we know that because when we look at the female mtDNA, which is a different topic, we know the L lineages are those lineages. So let's look at this. Let's go over here. Let's go to A, and let's go. I'm going to show you the full tree so we can see that. So CT, you see CT right there. Now, the reason why I'm showing you CT is because genetically, I'm going to show you something important to know genetically. There are genetically 3 splits in this family tree. I'm going to show you what geneticists say, right? Because it's important to know these different types of 3 different charts, right? You got your, right here, you got one that is unrooted. This is an unrooted chart. This type of style right there is called unrooted. This is called a circular chart. Sometimes you see charts that are circular, and then you'll see your normal mode of a chart. You see that it like that. And go over a little bit. So here's the design of those 3 splits. So this is what we're looking at. We're actually looking at these. We're going to look at this split and see where it splits at. And it splits at CT. And I'm going to show you. So this is going to be the line of Ham. It's going to be your Hamite line. And this is going to be your line of Shem, right here. Now, C actually most likely will be of the line of Japhetic. C would actually probably be Japhetic for the sake of understanding. It's actually probably over here. Now, this is going to be your Japhetic lines over here. And we're going to look at that. D, E, and the line of Japheth are actually on the same, they break from the same branch, CT. But one of them is younger, right? Ham is the youngest. He's the youngest one, and he breaks from BT. Now, sometimes they'll display BT being older than CT, but it's not actually older. We can find multiple different charts that actually has CT younger than BT, but they'll sometimes put it like that, and it's not like that. And we can actually show that the reason why it's like that is because of out of Africa concept that they try to pull. But they know that. Watch this. Watch what I'm going to show you here. So you see CT. If you close CT, you're going to have 2 lineage in there. If we open it, we're going to have CFs. And then from CT, you have CFs and you have DE. DE is going to bring you to your E lineages. That's what we're looking at now. These are your E lineages. Never let anyone tell you they came out of Africa. That's a false statement, because the oldest E that's found is in the Natufian, which are actually in the land of the Levant, which is Israel. The oldest evidence of E is in Israel. It's very important to understand that. Even we can find traces of it near the time where they digs of the people in the Philistines, right? We already looked at that with some of the people and whatnot. We had seen some of those people in that land, and we had looked at that the other day. I think that file is on here somewhere, which I'll actually go to that real fast, as I thought that was fairly interesting. I thought it was extremely interesting, to be honest with you, to find such lineages in certain places that really brings understanding to truth. It really does bring the scriptures in harmony. I think so. When we look at certain things like these things, just want to go down to something and go to that list. So I think that list is really interesting there. Just gonna see where it is, because it had in the land of the Philistines, it had 21 different groups. There was 21 different groups there, and it was crazy. And they had in the land of Philistines a majority of a lot of the J lineages, which many people tried to say was Shemitic, but it's not, because we found them in the land that was separated from Israel, which was the land of Sidon, the land of Sidon. We had a lot of visitation in that area. Just seeing where is that. Go over here, go up a little bit. Yeah, this one I just recently added after we was finding those graveyards that they had. Little graveyards in the land of, here is Sidon with the Phoenicians. I think I put this one on twice, I think. I'm just seeing if I had that other one. I had to look to see because I think this one is here twice. I meant to copy a different one. I meant to copy a different one. In fact, just checking here. Interesting list. It's a very interesting list. Let's see if I can find it. Nah. This was okay too, but that's not what I'm looking for. Just seeing where that list is. If it's not here, then I'm gonna have to find that and grab that in my history somewhere. All right, just taking one more look here. It's a really interesting and a rare find. I had found it really quick one day. Yeah, I must have accidentally copied it twice because I could see on one of those. Go down here. Just want to take another look here. Close that. This one is just the land of Iraq, which is really interesting too. You got a lot of J's here. I thought that was really interesting. But I want to find a certain one, which I think I did not save on this note, which is good that I came to look at this because let me see if it's here. I want to make sure I have that note because that note is pretty interesting. It's really interesting to see such a thing. I think I saved this like interesting. Just looking here. Yeah, this one is just about this certain group that they found, but there's one that I'm gonna have to look in a older video and grab that one because it's really interesting. It's really, really interesting. But how many people is in there? This one I already got. All right. Just was curious to see that. Now I'm glad that I came to look at this because I see that I need to grab that one. I need to make sure I grab that note from that little area because it's an interesting find. It's basically, this is it. There it is. I knew it. I wanted to make sure to see if I already had it. I got to make sure I remove some of those extra copied links, make it not so confusing. That's why I put pictures on this stuff. I'm at the screenshot this to take a picture of it. But this is really interesting because this area was the area of where the Philistines were, right? This was the area where the Philistines, and you can find so many different. It just paints a story. It just tells you a story, you know. To me, I see a story. I see because you know where this R lineage came from. This R lineage actually came from basically around the area of China, around where you see the Scythians and stuff like that. They actually went more eastward than they came back. It's really interesting to look at. Really interesting stuff to see, to go over. Really interesting. I just put some notes when I was looking at certain lines. I'm gonna go back over here. So they had some art lineages in that land. They had old lineages. They had N. They had L. Right. A lot of these you would think they were far off, but they were in that land. Right. J's. They got E's. They got E1B1A in that land, but only a little bit. As you can see, they don't. These don't actually. What's the word I'm looking for? They don't dominate that land. Whoever is the more larger group dominates that land, and we shouldn't find a lot of E1B1A in Sidon. We shouldn't find a lot of E1B1A because Israel was not in Sidon that much. Obviously, you'll have some that would obviously escape and go into that area who will rebel. That's just a given. You're going to have somebody that's going to rebel and go into that land, which is actually not something that Israel should have did. But what's interesting is Of course, we get a little bit of E. So if they try to say that there's no E in that area, this is the time of Israel. E lineages were up there. There's no doubt about that they were in the land of Israel. But also, what's interesting too, they also had that E1B1B in that area. So a larger portion of E1B1B in that area, right? Very, very interesting. And they also have high J's in that area. Now, the problem with this is that people try to say this is Israel, but we know that this is actually in Sidon. This is in the land of Sidon. And what makes it important to understand is that Israel never took this land. That's one of those lands that always stayed the same with its mingled company for a long time. In fact, go to a map of it. So you just gotta find one like in the time of Kings, and you'll see that it's basically, they call it the land right there, the Phoenician area, the land right there, the Canaanite area. These areas basically, you see how it's always this open area like this, Sidonese. You see that Sidon? This area, Israel was inside these areas, not in these areas. That's important to understand, right? When we think of the Phoenicians and stuff like that, they were actually their own. They had their own little area. They were never taken over by Israel. You can see right there, they would have their own spot. And that's what we're looking at, the people in Sidon. Sidon. That's what we're looking at, the people who was inside that land of Sidon. That's why I found that. I thought that was interesting to find some people in Sidon, because I knew that was one of those areas that was just untouched. Israel didn't get in there. They didn't get a chance to take over that. That was this little area. And it's like America, right? It's just a mingled company. That's all that's there. It's like a mingled group, just a mingled company that came down. In fact, it's proven that the ones, and that's why we did that video, that live the other day on the Phoenicians and the Canaanites, because this story is the Bible. This is actually the Bible. This is bringing us understanding to who was there, right? Because if we just think like, oh, these are Canaanites, then we're just guessing. We're not actually finding out true evidence that actually shows us what the Bible is actually illustrating, that this was actually a mingled group. This was actually a mingled group. This too. This was more to see people. These were more of a certain group. You will more see a R lineage with them. This one, you can see J, a lot of J down there that came into this area, that invaded in this area. And then you'll see E in these areas. And we know that because we can look at the Natufian DNA and see those things, right? I wish I already showed before, but if you already seen the little Natufian, and then we even got little linguistics that write about it. Really interesting on some of those things. I think I went over past it. I talk about it often because, if some people, they'll say, why are you looking at the E lineage? It doesn't seem, the world doesn't believe that the E lineage is up there. They believe it's obviously in Africa. But if you look at linguistics and look what they say, linguistics actually say that it's very similar to Semitic people and the people, as they say, they talk about the Natufian and everything. They talk about how the people in the West of West Africa, they seem like they are very similar. They're very similar. And they do a lot of comparisons with them and everything. When they talk about the ones who are the Natufians, when they compare the Natufians, and they say they are basically similar to those of West Africa, they basically show you that they're very similar. And that's just taking some of the things like their teeth and everything. So you can see this is actually where E is found, right? E lineage is actually found up here. And that's why geneticists often call it a Middle Eastern haplogroup. And that's why we're looking at it. That's why we're looking at this thing, because the real evidence, which they're not going to talk about, the real evidence is that it's surely found in the Middle East. It's not even a doubt to it. It's the E lineage is surely found in the Middle East. If someone said the E lineage is not found in the Middle East, they're lying. They're lying, or they don't know the truth. They don't know that E lineage is highly found. So this is one place. This is obviously just a little bit. You can see like 3 in some of these places and whatnot, and they see some there. Very interesting. But let's go. So you can see right here, CT splits into CF and it splits into DE, right? It splits into DE, which you get your D and your E lineages. And from CF, you get your HI, JK, element of P, QRX, all that stuff. Well, QR, right? T, QRST is what you get from these lineages. JI, all those, right? From your CF. But your DE is going to bring your D and E lineages. So you can see it's going to be an ancient branch here, and it goes and it goes and it goes. and then we're going to have Abraham at EP777. And then from there, you're actually going to get your E1B1B, which we already confirmed historically that the E1B1B is the Arabs. Really, really interesting history to that. Actually, I didn't even play something that I wanted to play. I wanted to play something really interesting history when we think of the Greeks and the Arabs and some of the invasions of the Turkish invasions. Very interesting when we look at the history with some of those things. It gets really deep, and that's what we want to do. We want to really connect these genetics with the history, because I think we connect these genetics with the history.
Turkey is a country at the crossroads of Europe and Asia. Turkey has a population of 82 million people, and from these, just a few thousand identify themselves as Greek. Being situated in Asia Minor, also known as Anatolia, the territory of present-day Turkey witnessed many transitions throughout its known history. The region was populated by some different ancient populations. One of them was the Greeks. Ancient Greek people settled on the west coast since the 20th century BC. The father of history, Herodotus, described Anatolia as a territory divided into regions. These regions were diverse in culture, language, and religious practices. But in the next hundreds of years, Greek culture and influence became stronger and stronger, especially at the peak of the Byzantine Empire during the 6th to 10th centuries. The Greeks were the majority in today's Anatolia. But what happened to them? We are happy to say that this episode is brought to you by our sponsor, Final Fantasy XV. Empire is a free...
You know what's interesting about Rome? It's actually interesting when you look at the family tree of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. I'm gonna just go to a family tree. Because we know that Rome is Japheth. We should all know that Rome is Japheth. But what's interesting about it is that Rome is also a branch from the Greeks, and they're under the what is called Yavain or Javane, as you can see, Javane. And actually, that would actually lead you. This is actually the Greeks. All these are actually descendants of the Greeks, and this would actually lead you to Kittim, which is actually a descendant of the Greeks. And if you look at how Rome was actually built, is actually built around the Greeks. That the Greeks were actually all around there, and a majority of Rome was actually Greeks. And that's just a branch of the Greeks. That's all that it is that is a branch of the Greeks. I thought that was interesting because actually the story of Rome is actually just a branch of Greece. It's just a branch of Greeks. Really interesting when you look at that. So I'm just going to let this continue past this little advertisement, get right to the meat of the truth.
Sea. Following upheavals in mainland Greece during the Bronze Age collapse, the Aegean coast of Asia Minor was heavily settled by Greeks and became known as Ionia.
All right, so remember, it's really interesting because you see how this is called, you can see the Aegean, right? The Aegean people and whatnot. That's actually where you have Greece. And we found out something really interesting when we was looking at the Philistines. We found out their Y chromosome. Because I think this geneticist, he says it very well too, what he says. I don't know if I have it on here, but he says something really interesting. He says, the Y chromosome is the key. It's the key to understanding these things. It's the key. It's one of the keys that you need to understand these things. But let's go over here. I want to show you something on this thing. I want to go to right here. When we were studying the sea peoples and how they were connected to the Philistines and everything, we looked at their Y chromosome and whatnot, and we found out they had a certain subclad, which was actually going to be R1b M269. And we found that, as you see, they actually found out the Philistines were Aegeans, right? And that's what we're seeing here. The Aegean Sea, they found out that the Philistines came from probably over here, right? They say from this little area right here, and they probably came down and they settled in the area of the Philistines. And we know because we can find their genetics exactly matching.